As you probably remember, I've spent 3 years of my recent teaching career out of the classroom and doing Common Core professional development. I have spent this time working largely in other people's classrooms where they would invite me to come in and teach for a week, and we'd analyze lessons and instructional styles and doing professional development opportunities. In that time, I have had an incredible opportunity to work closely with the Common Core state standards and the older standards, and to really see the connection and to really look at my instruction and the instruction of other people that I'm having the opportunity to observe. When I met with you last time, we talked a lot about literacy and not really, I mentioned the Common Core state standards, but we didn't talk about them. So at the beginning today, we're going to talk for about 30 minutes about the standards themselves and the structure and the design, just to make sure that we are all on the same page as far as this goes. This is not an in-depth Common Core training, though, because I'm assuming that there are varying degrees of Common Core awareness in this room. I don't want to waste anyone's time by spending too much time on it. If at any time you want more information, please feel free to interrupt me and ask. Or if you want more resources in the future, you can absolutely always email me and get those resources from me. Okay? Okay, so let's talk about the Common Core state standards. And I have a document here that you're not going to be able to read, but it will be, this whole PowerPoint will be posted for you on the resources page of your website, so you can go back and read anything in detail that you want. This is from the Math Standards document page, and I'm just going to highlight a couple of points here. I'm sure these are buzzwords that you've heard, phrases that you've heard. They talk about all students. This is a cover page, an introduction for math, and they talk about all students. Is this something that we hear all the time lately? These standards are not for some, they are for all, right? Again, they talk about every student, providing every student with these opportunities. They talk about the essential component that math plays in pursuing future careers. It is essential for all students to have this foundation in order to pursue a career in the future, any kind of career. For all of our students to compete successfully in the global economy. In order for our 18-year-olds to be competitive with other 18-year-olds, in order for 18-year-olds who live in Lamont to be competitive with 18-year-olds who live in New York City, we need to make sure that we have standards and expectations for these students, and that we allow our students access to these skills so that they can be competitive with their peers. Throughout, they're talking about all students. They're talking about globally competitive. They're talking about the importance of reaching all of these students, and that success in math, success with these skills, will help students in all content areas. They specifically list, of course, math, science, technical subjects. They talk about all success in all content areas. They then focus here on, and they say, the sentence reads, the goal in mathematics education is for students to develop fluency in basic computational skills, to develop an understanding of mathematical concepts, to become mathematical problem solvers who can recognize and solve routine problems readily and can find ways to reach solutions or goals where no routine path is apparent. So we have the normal structure, we have the expected outcome, but that's not available. So now what? How are we going to see these situations in diverse ways so that we can problem solve even when it's not a standard situation? That our students can communicate precisely about quantities, logical relationships, and unknown values through the use of signs, symbols, models, graphs, and mathematical terms. That they can reason mathematically by gathering data, analyzing evidence, building arguments to support or refute hypotheses, make connections among mathematical ideas and between mathematics and other disciplines. What you will see is the recurring theme on this page is that this is for all students, for success beyond the classroom, for success beyond mathematics to the world outside. You see this? Now, what's interesting for me is that this document is from the 1997 standards. This is not Common Core. These are when California first adopted standards in 1997 as a result of a research study and the publishing of A Nation at Risk. California and all of the other states said we have to have expectations, common expectations for our students. This is the document that California published at that time. One very common misnomer. A misnomer is a misapplied name. So a misnomer for Common Core is that Common Core is the new math, or that this is the Common Core math that we're facing now. And that's not at all true. All of the expectations that we will talk about with the Common Core math are the expectations that we had with the 97 standards as well. Because these are the skills that our students need to be successful in life. Our students don't need that naked math. Our students need to be able to think mathematically and to reason through situations and to analyze the situations so that they know which math they need to use at that time, right? That's what we need to use as adults. So why is it, bless you, why is it that this misapplication of terms is happening? Why do people see this as so different? Yes?
I grew up on this one as a teacher. Actually, I remember having standards before this. I started teaching before this. But
you probably had expectations that were set like by a district or a department. Yes.
Anyway, sorry. It's great place now. I loved it then. The kids are amazing. But what happened is bubble tests.
Bubble tests. Assessment drives instruction. Assessment drives instruction. I say that, and when I say that, I cringe. But at the same time, it should. It should. I will assess you continually throughout today. Continually throughout today, I will be looking over your shoulder and reading your notes to see if what I'm trying to convey is coming across. If it's not, I'm going to change my instruction. Assessment should drive instruction if the assessment is good, right? There are some states that are ahead of us with Common Core. The only reason is that their tests that went back 15 years were more aligned to the tests that we're rolling out now. Ours were very different. You maybe have heard that the California standards set the bar for Common Core. They were one of the most rigorous, the state had one of the most rigorous set of standards, but our test did not reflect that. And so our instruction changed. Not right away. I know mine didn't right away. I kept teaching the way that I thought that I was supposed to be teaching. And then there were schools and districts whose test scores rocketed because they were teaching to the test. And then we started assigning homework. I never did this, but my son came home with a homework assignment on how to bubble. The entire assignment was a bubbling exercise. Because if they bubble wrong, even if they know the right answer, right? And remember, we just said assessment drives instruction, which is good until the assessment is bad. This is hopefully the last time I'm going to mention throwing the CSTs under the bus. But here they go once again. The only thing the data that we got from the CSTs showed us is which students marked the correct answer. Not which ones knew the correct answer, because we had students who knew the correct answer, but something in the wording, something in the design threw them off. But you know that if you have that conversation with that student, you know they know it. They could explain it, they just can't mark the correct one. We also know that students marked the correct answer who had no idea because they just bubbled in really well, right? They bubbled in beautifully. Or they copied, yeah. Or they did all C or something. They had, you know, you had those students who drew pictures, right, in the bubbles. Patterns, absolutely. Okay. So, keeping in mind that the Common Core state standards are not new. They're not that different. In fact, and we'll talk about the literacy standards in a few minutes, all of the content area standards from 97, 98, from that rollout, all of them had literacy standards, but they were on a separate page. So even when you look at science standards or social studies standards that have a lot of knowledge retention written into the content area itself, on a separate page they had the literacy standards, but they were never tested. And so most of the social studies and science teachers that I speak to did not know that they existed because they were irrelevant to us in the classroom. Okay. So now let's look at what these skills look like in the wording of Common Core. We just looked at them in the 97 wording, and you'll see that these are very much the same. There are 8 standards for mathematical practice. These are the 8 skills with which our students are supposed to attack math. 8 skills with which they attack math. What is your favorite word in this one? Oh my goodness, if only. If only. Oh my goodness. That one word, if we could get them to persevere, I feel, going back into the classroom, that it is my goal in 180 days, my goal is to teach perseverance. Everything else is secondary. If they will persevere and attack, I will retire happy. Anything, pretty much anything. And yet, my boys will research Minecraft and things like that to no end. Yes, so they do persevere, just not when it's not their choice, right? Reason abstractly and quantitatively, construct viable arguments, and critique the reasoning of others. I love this one because this is where the math sense comes in. This is where whether or not it's logical, you ask them 2 + 2 and they say 75. And you sit there and go, how in the world could that be 75? And they're like, that's what I got, right? They don't have that analytical mind, or they're not used, they do have it. They're not used to using it. Model with mathematics. Passivity. Being a passive learner is a conditioned response. They weren't born that way. They were born investigating and challenging and seeking out alternative methods. And then we put them in our classroom and we said, oh, they are more patient than we are. And so if they don't have the answer right away, we give it to them. And they know that. And so why would they persevere? Why would they challenge when they've been told over and over and over again that they should not? So we have to change the social climate. We need to change that climate in our classroom. We need to train them. Some of the most effective teaching I have ever seen is with teachers who never have the answer. I don't know, what do you think? Or they put something on the board and they say, gosh, that doesn't look right to me. What do you think? And it's the most effective teaching, and it's so frustrating for the students for the first month or so. And they go home every day and they say, man, I have the stupidest teacher. She does not know anything, right? And then eventually they start going, wait a second, right? And they start realizing that, oh, I've really learned a lot. I have learned a lot. I haven't been fed a lot. I've actually learned. And that's our goal. So we need to make sure that we change that climate in our classroom. This is one and I probably mentioned last time that I would teach math during the summer. I I am as guilty of this in English probably, but it's more evident to me when I teach math that I never required my students to do this. I fed them the tools. I told them, I gave them the graph that they were supposed to use. I told them everything that they were supposed to use for a situation. I told them what kind of math they were supposed to use to solve this problem. Our textbooks do this as well. They will give the naked math problems, and at the bottom, they give the word problems, and the students just apply this structure to that. That's not problem solving. That's not what they're going to get when they're 28. When they're 28, they're going to get a word problem, a real life word problem, and they're going to have to figure out what math they need in order to solve that. So we need to make sure again that we switch that and that we teach them how to do this. Attend to precision. Persevere and attend to precision. Yes, that would be great. Look for and make use of structure. So much structure in math that we're providing to them instead of making them aware of or allowing them to discover. Regularity in repeated reasoning. And I love this. Look for and express. Can they identify it and be able to articulate how this reasoning applies in different situations? Okay. These are the 8 skills that they are going to attack exponents with, and algebra, and geometry, and these are the skills that they need to apply to the content, because if they have these skills, folks, if I don't remember how to factor a quadratic equation, I can look it up. I can refresh my memory on that. These are the skills that I need in life, right? So I want you to look at these for a moment, and I want you to think about how these 8 skills would apply to a different content area. If you're thinking about ELA, if you're thinking about social studies, science, career tech, several people get stuck here and they're like, well, we don't model with math, aside from science. But I disagree, because modeling with mathematics is where you take something pictorial and express it in words, or you take something in words and then do a representation of it. We do that all the time when we imagine something and then have to write it, or we are analyzing a political cartoon and we have to write it or speak about it. We're taking a model and changing its form all the time, aren't we? Yes? Discovering the patterns. Absolutely. In which classes do we discover patterns? Everything? Spelling? What else? Science? Art? History? That's all of history, isn't it? That's all of social studies, is seeing those patterns. Yeah. Okay. So I lied. This is the last time I'm throwing the CSTs under the bus. We've been trying to fit this square peg into a bubble-in answer sheet, right? And what is maybe more startling about this image, not startling, jarring. What is jarring about this image are all of the shavings. Yeah. The reason that our students are passive, the reason that our students don't challenge, the reason that our math students can't speak or write math is because we've cut that out, because it didn't fit into the expectations at that time. Maybe not our expectations, the imposed expectations of that time. The beauty of Common Core is that it is allowing us to go back and pick up those shavings. It is giving us the opportunity to do what we know we should have been doing and we know that our students need. opportunity that we have is to change the culture, to change the mindset of these students, because they have been indoctrinated, and we have the opportunity to change this, right? I want you to take your lined paper out. If you have not already taken a couple of notes, I'd like you to jot a note or two about something that you have learned just now. I'm going to give you about 45 seconds. Very few of you wrote the same words, even key terms. Very few of you focused on the same things. So what I'm going to have you do for just a couple of minutes here is turn to your neighbor and talk to your neighbor about some takeaways or some insights that you've already discovered. Turn to your neighbor. There was a common theme among several groups, and they were talking about how so much of this is the result of time, class time allotment, and how so many things had to be cut for sake of time. Because we, those of us who taught before the CSTs, we know how important this is. We as teachers, we know how important all of this is, and so we tried to keep it in there. But we were encouraged to, isn't that politically correct? We were encouraged to cover information. I hopefully mentioned this last time. If I didn't, I'm mentioning it now. This will change you forever because it changed me forever. I taught next to a gentleman who, such a good friend, such a great, infuriating man. He would always ask me, to what end? Everything that I wanted to do, he'd say, to what end? To what end? Why are you doing that? If you say, well, I can't take time to do this because I have to do this, because I have to get to the end of this chapter, my question would be, to what end? Why? And your answer might be sound. Your answer might be, if they don't get this concept, they will not be able to go on to the next chapter. Okay, then you have to cover that. But you might not get to the last chapter of the book. And that's okay, right? It is okay. I'm telling you right now, it is okay. What is not okay is dropping off this. It is far better to focus on these 8 skills than to reach chapter 12. Do you agree? Do you see that? Because next year, you know what the teacher's going to start with? Chapter 11, and then go over chapter 12. And if the students have this depth of knowledge, they will be able to apply it to the breadth of knowledge. You see that? So you have these 8 skills that you need to use recursively. I would argue, I do argue, I encourage with everyone that as you are doing a pacing guide, as you are planning instruction, these need to be the focus of your conversation. Not page 17, not quadratic equations even. We need to look at these 8 skills and we need to think, how do those apply to quadratic equations? How can I teach these skills through this content? Okay? If we agree that these are the skills that they're going to need when they're 28, we need to start working on them now. And we need to work on them every single day. So this needs to be a poster in your classroom. This needs to be at the top of your lesson planning book. This needs to be the focus of your planning and your conversations. How are we going to teach them this? Not that it's overwhelming at all, right? This is a chart. I don't believe I showed this last time. This was provided by the Leadership and Learning Center. And I thought that this made so much sense. So if you think of the Madeline Hunter lesson plan, this is traditional instruction. So before instruction, we hook them with the anticipatory set, right? We show them the background and the relevance. And then while we're teaching, we're working with them on remembering and understanding and applying that information. But it is not until we stop talking, It is not until we stop talking that our students start analyzing, evaluating, and creating. This is huge. It seems like, well, duh, but it's huge because for about 10 years, I did all of the analyzing, evaluating, and creating in my classroom. I would teach my students an analysis and have them feed it back to me. I would show them how to create something and ask them to replicate it. I would solve a problem for them in a critical thinking way and then just change the numbers out. So I'm using all of this class time, I'm using my 180 days, and I'm not getting my students past here. I should say that differently. I'm not giving my students the opportunity to get past here. In my ELA classroom, I would teach Romeo and Juliet for 6 weeks, teach it really well. We'd act out the whole thing. I'd explain every line. They loved it. I have students who, they know this play inside and out, and at the end of the 6 weeks, I would ask them to regurgitate. I was using Shakespeare and really kind of keeping them here. After I realized what I was doing, I'd still taught Romeo and Juliet, but I was teaching them how to read Shakespeare through using Romeo and Juliet. I was teaching them how to identify theme and how to see characterization and read difficult text. And at the end, I gave them a different piece of Shakespeare to read independently to see if they could do all of this on their own, right? We also have the opportunity in math class now, and we'll look at some examples of this in all classes, but particularly in math and science, we have the opportunity now to start this differently. We have the opportunity now to start a lesson with our students here. And I know that Dr. A's talked about this quite a bit. I know you've been working with this, allowing the students to really get into it and then shoring up the learning. So we're going to look at some examples of that today too. How can we make sure that our students get to those higher level skills? Because these last three, this is when the learning becomes portable. This is when they can take it outside of your classroom and use it elsewhere. Here, they can pass a test. They can complete a homework assignment. Here is when they can use it in life. So if we never give them the opportunity to reach those levels, we have not prepared them for when they are 28. Do you see that? I say things like that, like, do you see that? And you nod your heads, and then I'm going to pretend, oh, they all get it. And we're going to move on. That's why I read your notes. Okay. Here's a quote to further cement. I'm not going to read it to you, even though I really want to. You can read it yourselves. I love that. I love that. That it puts such a vivid picture in my head of this lazy thinking that I'd been requiring for so long. And I don't want lazy thinkers. I want active thinkers. I do not want to promote a generation of couch potato thinkers, right? Okay. If this were all on you, if this only took place in one classroom, it would be the equivalent of how I learned Spanish in high school. When I was in high school, I took Spanish 1 period a day. And then I left that classroom and never used it again, ever. And so I have like 5 phrases I can say today. Actually, I can say the entire Pledge of Allegiance in Spanish because We did the Pledge of Allegiance in second period, and I had Spanish second period. So for 180 days, I did the Pledge of Allegiance in Spanish. So I can say that. I can also ask where America is, order a beer, and say I have a headache. So I guess that makes me pretty effective in certain situations. I can ask where the bathroom is. That's good too. I don't know very many. I'm going to need to learn in the next month. Yes, I need to make sure that I have a really deep in service in the next month. Why is it though? Why was my information not portable? I never used it outside of that classroom. It stayed there in the classroom. I had it for 4 years, but it stayed in the classroom. If I told you right now, I have to learn Spanish in the next month, what would you tell me to do? Go to Mexico.
Yeah, no, just come and live down here.
Yes, but immerse yourself, right? You would say immerse yourself in the language. One of the problems with trying to teach critical thinking is when it only happens in your classroom. But if you are a 3rd, 4th, 5th grade teacher, you have those kids awake during the day more than their parents do. So you have the opportunity to really make an impact. If you teach 6th, 7th, 8th, and you have them for fewer hours, maybe just 1 hour, it is incredibly important that you are not in this alone. We know this. It's like if you don't allow your students to wear hats, but everyone else does, you have a battle every single day. It's the cell phones, it's the gum chewing. We have to make a united effort, or else what do? Oh, forget it. It's not a battle worth fighting, right? So we have to make sure that we are all in this together. That is what is different about the Common Core State Standards, is that the writers of the Common Core State Standards have said, and you're all in this together. So what they have done is they've taken the 8 standards for mathematical practice, and all of this is on your website, the 8 standards for mathematical practice and the literacy standards, and they are incredibly similar, and we're going to have an opportunity to look at the similarities in just a moment. There's one thing that I want to point out to you, though. For reading, there are 10 standards. I think I mentioned this last time. There are 10 standards for reading. Number 10 is that they read at grade level, which they don't. But it's a separate standard. So as long as we're working with all of the reading skills at their level and remembering we need to get them to grade level, we're doing our job. Because if I were to take a 7th grade student and put a 7th grade text in front of them, they would be defeated. So I'm going to teach them the reading skills with their level and then work on increasing their level as well. Writing number 10 is that they write a lot. So as long as they're writing, they're covering writing number 10. So essentially, there are 9 skills for reading, 9 skills for writing, and how many for math? 8. Okay? What I have for each of you today is a stack of cards. In these cards, you will find all of these standards. So you have the 8 standards for mathematical practice, the 10 reading, and the 10 writing. These are the anchor standards, the overall standards for these skills. What I want you to do when I give these to you, and these are yours to keep from this day forward, in sickness and in health, forsaking all others. What I want you to do is I want you to play cards. I want you to sort these. I want you to read them and make connections, go from easiest to most difficult, find a yellow, green, and blue that go together, whatever you want to do. However it makes sense to you to sort these and arrange these and just kind of play with them. We're going to take 10 minutes to do this. okay? In a little bit, we're going to have a stretch break, but if you want to get up and walk around during this time, make sure that you spend at least 8 minutes playing cards. I promise you that 6th, 7th, and 8th minute, you will see something. You need to spend some time with these, okay? We will have time to talk after. If you talk a little bit during, that's okay, but I want you really just playing with your cards, okay?
Are these on the website?
I'm pretty sure what they want us to do is fine. One is on the
And then under, it has like little.
Estas son las tres.
With the reading. Well, this is what we were talking about, how it's like similar to the engineering design process. Right.
Did anyone make a connection and then move a card? Say, this connects really well. Oh, wait, it connects really well here. Oh, wait, it connects really well here, right? These skills are recursive. You're not going to work with one of these skills on September 7th and never again, right? So every single time I have groups do this, I sit down and do it myself. Every single time. So I've done this hundreds of times, and I've never done it the same way twice, ever. And I'm certain that the connections that I make change every time because that's okay. I can do that. If I'm working with, one of the connections that was made just now was reading, well, let's just say math practice 3 and reading 1. And I am having them make their arguments. They're constructing their arguments and they're critiquing the reasoning of others. But on reading 1, it talks about pulling the evidence from the text. And I see they can make their argument, but it's not solid because they're not pulling evidence. So I can actually put this card away on September 8th and keep this card on September 8th and then bring another card up to join with it, right? And I can keep focusing on the skills that they're struggling with over and over because you see how these are all skills and they're not tied to content. I could employ all of these skills when teaching geometry. I could employ all of these skills with the text of the Red Badge of Courage. I could employ all of these skills when teaching robotics, right? Because it's the skills that we need to be portable. And the beauty of all of us being in this together is that they won't stay trapped in your classroom. And one of the tricks we talked about, not only do we need to metacognate, we need our students to metacognate. Don't make this a secret that they're going from one classroom to the next and working on the same skills. Or in your third grade class, we're working with this one skill in social studies and science and math and language arts today. All day today is going to be reading 3 so that they are aware that the skill is transferable and will move throughout their lives. All right? It would be a tragedy, I promise you, it would be a tragedy if you never pick up these cards again. Because the next time you open them, you will see them differently. But you can put them away for now. We are not going to talk about rubrics today. But I will say that on my cards, my set of cards for myself, I have a rubric on the back of each one for that skill. The reason that, and for like this much time, I provided them to people, but then I realized that my rubrics were a work in progress, that they weren't ready yet. They weren't objective enough. They were still a little bit too subjective. And so, but I would encourage you, if you're working with your PLC, if you're working in your groups, if you come up with some rubrics for these, put them on the back of the card. So I will give these to Tony to post, and I'll put them in a Word document and a PDF so that if you want to do anything to change them to put like a rubric or something on the back, you can absolutely do that, okay? That way you can quickly evaluate. All right. I love that we are all in this together. When we talk about this alignment of the Common Core standards, we talk about them being horizontally aligned. That means that I can talk to every single content area about Reading Standard 3, and it's the same standard. The standards exist horizontally across a campus. But they also came to us vertically aligned. So this skill that you just read, the anchor standards up here, they've taken that skill and they've said this is what a 28-year-old needs to be able to do. This is what they should be able to do in 11th grade, in 9th grade, in 6th grade, in 4th grade, all the way down. Because I don't know if any of you started to have a little anxiety attack when you were looking at these cards, but all of these skills have to be performed entirely independently by your students. Entirely independently. So as you can imagine, it would be difficult to get to that level of rigor today, right? Especially because they have not been conditioned for this way of thinking, right? So we have to get over the conditioning first. These spirals are on your website so that when you look at a skill and you think, okay, but my kids aren't there yet, now you can see a very easy staircase of how to get them there. Start baby steps, right? But make sure you are moving them. What we don't want to do is we don't want to say, my kids are here, so I'm going to spend all year teaching here, right? I want to say, my kids need to be here. How can I help them get here, right? So we want to make sure that we identify where they are and we help them get where they need to be. We talked about how we have a 6th grade student who is supposed to determine a central idea of a text and how it is conveyed through particular details and is supposed to provide a summary of the text, but oh my gosh, they don't read at a 6th grade level. What am I going to do? Give them a lower level text to apply that skill to. Horrible grammar, okay? Like this. We looked at this last time. We looked at this text before. This is a text. Anything you can read is a text. Anything you can read is a text. So we can teach them these skills with something simple, basic, more foundational, and then increase the rigor of the text. Okay. This is the one that always gets me. Kindergarten says, with prompting and support, identify the main topic and retell key details of a text. Kindergarten is the only level where it reads with prompting and support. And so for 15 years, I taught kindergarten in a high school classroom because I don't know that my students did anything without prompting and support. I mean, if I think about how even my telling them, write a 5-paragraph essay, why 5? It is completely arbitrary, though. That number,
So you can get 3.
why 3? As an adult, I have never, ever, as an adult, written a 5-paragraph essay, ever. 5-paragraph essays only exist in the classroom. I write 27-paragraph essays. I write 2-paragraph essays, right? So we need to keep in mind what we are supporting them with and making sure that we always take that away at some point. We talked about this last time, scaffolding. Scaffolding has to be temporary. It has to be there, though, because they're not there yet, right? We have to have that support prepared for when they need it, but until we remove it, they are not performing the skills. The saying is, if they can't do it without you in the room, they can't do it. If they can't do it without you in the room, they can't do it. So you have to make sure that you always keep in mind that you are preparing them for when they are 28. I think I told you this last time. I I was the best teacher. Some of you struggled your first couple of years. I didn't. I was a great teacher from day one. And you know how I know this? It's because my students, from the very first year teaching, my students would call me after and would say, okay, I'm at BC and I'm writing an essay. What should I do? I was like, oh my gosh, I'm such a good teacher. They want me to help them. And then I realized, oh wait, if I'd taught them, they wouldn't have needed me to help them, right? My ego was decimated at that point. I realized I didn't teach them a darn thing. I made them dependent upon me. I don't want them calling me.
Other than to say, hey, I've just written this great book.
Yeah, I got an A on a paper that you didn't help me with. That would be great. That would be great. All right, take 45 seconds to write a note about anything that we've discussed so far this morning. I'm going to read over your shoulder, and then we'll talk and share out. I've heard so much good stuff walking around. If you haven't already, share with your table what you've been talking or what you've written and what you've learned. One recurring theme is that it's going to take so much to train us to allow them. Heard that from so many of you, read that on so many of your pages. You're not being critical of the students, which this makes you fabulous teachers. This is what makes you fabulous teachers. Because what typically happens is people will say, well, but my students can't or won't, or that's not your perspective. Your perspective is, oh my gosh, I have to allow them to. I have to step back. And that is so difficult. It is so difficult. So we need to change the expectations that we have for ourselves first. In order to reach every student, you must first reach every teacher, right? It horrifies me to say this. I say this a lot, but it horrifies me to say this with third grade teachers in the room. Getting emotional. You could be their very last teacher. Every single person in here could be the very last teacher these children ever have. You have students who will leave school after third grade and never go back. You definitely have students who will leave school after 8th grade and never go back. And you know this. So there is no time to waste. You are not allowed to waste a single moment in your classroom with these students. With everything you do, you have to think to what end? When I ask you what you taught today, it should not be Tuck Everlasting. It should not be quadratic equations. It should be the skills. There should be something in your statement that focuses on the skills that need the longevity. Anyone feeling overwhelmed? We have the most difficult job in the whole world. All of the pressure is on you, and this is just the beginning. How about a break? Let's take 15 minutes, folks.